I never thought my own son, Jason, and his wife, Meryl, could betray us like this. One evening, they trapped my husband, Dean, and me in the basement of our own home. Panic clawed at me, but then Dean leaned close and whispered, "Quiet. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about." My name is Lila, and I've always believed in family. Dean and I have worked hard our whole lives, raising Jason with love and trust. Our home was our safe place, filled with laughter, dinners together, and quiet weekends. We never imagined that the people we trusted most could turn on us. Lately, I noticed small changes in Jason and Meryl. They seemed secretive, whispering when we entered a room, making subtle jokes at our expense. I brushed it off, thinking it was just their normal disagreements. I never suspected they would go so far. That evening started like any other. Jason invited us for dinner, and we thought it was normal. After dessert, they guided us to the basement, claiming it was for a small surprise. Suddenly, the door clicked, and we were trapped. My heart pounded. I banged on the door, screamed for help, but it was no use. Dean stayed calm, his hand on mine. He whispered for me to stay quiet, telling me to listen and watch. Even in fear, I felt a strange sense of trust in him. We realized then that panic wouldn't help. We needed to understand why our own son and his wife had turned against us and what they wanted from us. In that basement, our world shifted, and I knew nothing would ever be the same again. After the basement incident, I began noticing Jason and Meryl behaving differently around money. They suddenly became very careful about what they shared with us. Bills, account statements, and small purchases were hidden or avoided in conversation. Their eyes flicked away when I asked simple questions, and I sensed a quiet tension I had never seen before. Small arguments started to surface in our home. Jason made comments that felt sharp, though he pretended they were jokes. Meryl would nod or laugh, but there was an edge in her tone that made me uneasy. Dean tried to ignore it, telling me not to read too much into their behavior, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. One evening, I noticed Jason holding a small, unfamiliar key. It wasn't attached to anything we recognized, and he looked startled when I asked about it. He quickly hid it in his pocket and changed the subject. The sight of that key gnawed at me. What was it for? Why was he hiding it? I started keeping track of their movements and conversations, trying to understand what they were up to. Every whispered discussion, every secretive glance, made me feel like the people I trusted most were slowly shutting me out. The house no longer felt like a safe place, it felt like a stage where secrets were performed behind closed doors. Despite my unease, I tried to remain calm. I told myself I could be overthinking, that family sometimes has tensions, and that perhaps this was temporary. But deep down, I sensed a storm brewing. The key, the hushed talks, and the sudden defensiveness were warning signs. Something was coming, and I had to be ready for it before it was too late. Jason called us one afternoon, inviting Dean and me over for what sounded like a normal dinner. I thought it was an attempt to mend the growing distance between us. Meryl's voice was cheerful when she answered the phone, but there was something in her tone I couldn't place. We accepted, hoping for a peaceful evening. The meal was surprisingly quiet. Jason and Meryl served dishes carefully prepared, smiling as if nothing was wrong. But I noticed subtle glances exchanged between them, a shared understanding that excluded us. The air felt heavy, like something was being planned beyond our awareness. After we finished eating, Meryl suggested showing us a fun surprise in the basement. I hesitated, sensing an odd tension, but Dean encouraged me to go along. The moment we stepped down the stairs, the door slammed behind us. Metal locks clicked into place. My stomach dropped. Panic rose like fire, and I pounded on the door, screaming for help. Dean immediately grabbed my hand, pulling me close. His eyes met mine, steady and calm despite the fear. "Quiet, they're listening," he whispered. His voice was firm, almost a shield against my terror. I tried to control my breathing, listening carefully to the faint sounds outside the door. Shadows from the small basement light stretched across the walls, making the room feel smaller, more suffocating. Every creak of the house, every distant laugh or footstep above, set my nerves on edge. I realized then that this was no harmless joke. Jason and Meryl had planned this. They wanted to see how we reacted when trapped, and perhaps to scare us into compliance. As fear threatened to overwhelm me, I clung to Dean's calm presence. His whisper reminded me that panic would get us nowhere. I needed to stay alert, watch, and wait. This trap was only the beginning. From the basement, I pressed my ear to the wall, straining to catch any sound from above. At first, all I heard was faint movement and quiet murmurs, but then Jason and Meryl's voices grew sharper. I could make out words that froze me in place: inheritance, property, control. They argued about taking everything Dean and I had worked for, dividing our life between themselves. A cold realization swept over me. This was no innocent prank. The basement trap, the smiles, the surprise, it had all been calculated. Every detail had been planned to intimidate us, to test our reactions, to see if we could be pressured into giving up what was ours. The shock cut deep, like a knife twisting in my chest. My hands trembled as I processed the betrayal. My own son, the boy I had nurtured, and his wife, who had become like a daughter to me, were scheming to steal from us. A mix of anger, disbelief, and heartbreak made it hard to breathe. I felt utterly exposed, like the foundation of my family had crumbled. Dean squeezed my shoulder, noticing my silent reaction. His steady presence grounded me, but the hurt was mine alone. How could someone we raised, loved, and trusted plan such deceit? How could our home, once a place of warmth, become a stage for their greed? Tears welled in my eyes, but I refused to let despair take over. I swallowed the pain and focused on what I had to do next. Betrayal from blood is a wound that cuts the deepest, but it also ignites determination. They thought they could scare us, manipulate us, and take everything. They had no idea we were just beginning to understand the game, and we were already planning our next move. Dean leaned close, his voice low but firm. "We need to stay calm and watch carefully," he said. His eyes scanned the basement, taking in every corner, every shadow. I nodded, trying to steady my racing heart. Fear was still there, but his presence reminded me that panic would only make things worse. We began examining the door and walls, looking for anything that could give us an advantage. My fingers traced the cold metal lock, testing for weak spots, while Dean checked the hinges and the frame. After a few tense minutes, he discovered a small vent near the ceiling. It wasn't large enough to escape through, but it was perfect for listening. Through that vent, we could catch snippets of Jason and Meryl's voices and movements. It gave us a small sense of control in a situation that had seemed hopeless. I pressed my ear to the vent, hearing their distant laughter and whispered conversations. Each word reminded me of their betrayal, but also gave clues we could use later. Anger bubbled inside me, sharp and consuming. The shock of their actions had faded slightly, replaced by a burning determination. I would not let them get away with this. Every deceitful glance, every hidden plan, every greedy word only fueled my resolve. Dean noticed the change in me and squeezed my hand. "We'll get through this," he said. "We just need patience and a plan." His calm voice strengthened me, and I began imagining how we could turn the tables, how we could reclaim what was ours. Locked in that basement, powerless at first, I felt something shift. Fear was still present, but now it shared space with purpose. Our time to act was coming, and I would be ready. While listening through the vent, memories started flooding back. Small incidents I had dismissed suddenly made sense. Jason had always been clever about money, subtly shifting bills or suggesting better ways to handle our accounts. Meryl had joined in quietly, agreeing to his ideas with a smile that now seemed rehearsed. I remembered letters and documents I had signed years ago, thinking they were routine. There were times Jason had asked for changes in our property deeds or to co-sign small loans temporarily. At the time, it all seemed harmless, part of growing independence. Now, I saw the pattern, a careful build-up to take control. Dean leaned close, noticing my thoughts. We started reviewing everything in our minds: bank statements, property deeds, even old legal papers. Each detail was a potential piece of evidence. Every past favor Jason had requested, every sly suggestion Meryl had made, could now serve as proof of intent. The more I remembered, the angrier I became, but I forced myself to stay focused. Rage alone wouldn't help us. We had to be smart, patient, and deliberate. Dean and I silently mapped out how we could use these old clues to our advantage. Each recollection strengthened our strategy and clarified the steps we needed to take once we were free. It was clear that their greed was not sudden; it had been growing for years, carefully hidden behind polite manners and family smiles. Recognizing this pattern gave me a sense of control. By the time we finished, our panic had shifted into resolve. We were no longer helpless victims. We had knowledge, insight, and a plan forming in our minds. When the moment came, Jason and Meryl would face consequences they never imagined. I pressed my ear closer to the vent, straining to hear every word. Meryl's voice came first, low and confident. She was talking about selling the house and keeping the money for themselves. My heart sank. The home I had poured years of love into, the place filled with memories, was now a commodity in their scheme. Jason's voice joined hers, sharp and commanding. He wanted to make sure Dean and I were left with nothing, excluded entirely from decisions about the property or finances. The words cut deeper than any slap or insult. It was one thing to argue or disagree, but this was deliberate, calculated betrayal from the son I had raised and trusted completely. I sank to the floor, overwhelmed. My hands trembled, and tears blurred my vision. How could someone I had nurtured think of me and Dean as obstacles to profit? How could they plan to erase our lives so easily, without remorse or conscience? The realization of their greed and cruelty was suffocating. Dean knelt beside me, placing a hand on my shoulder, steadying me. "Breathe," he whispered, his voice gentle but firm. I tried to focus on his calm, to anchor myself, but the sting of treachery burned through every thought. For a long moment, I allowed myself to feel the betrayal fully, the heartbreak, the disbelief, the shock. But amid the pain, a spark of clarity ignited. This wasn't just about fear or helplessness. It was about survival, about reclaiming what was ours, about making them understand the cost of their choices. I wiped my tears and squared my shoulders. The depth of their betrayal had been revealed, but it also revealed a path forward. They had underestimated us, and that mistake would be their downfall. Dean reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, worn tool he had kept hidden for situations like this. I hadn't realized he was prepared, but his calm expression gave me hope. With careful movements, he worked on the basement lock, his hand steady despite the tension in the air. Minutes felt like hours, but finally, the lock clicked. The door creaked open, and I followed Dean silently, heart pounding with relief and adrenaline. We stepped into the hallway, moving slowly, listening for any sound from Jason and Meryl. Every footstep was measured, every breath controlled. Once we were free from the basement, we found a quiet corner of the house to hide. Behind a heavy armchair, we could observe without being seen. From this vantage, we watched Jason pace, speaking rapidly to Meryl, neither aware that we were close enough to hear everything. The fear that had gripped me in the basement was still there, but it was joined by determination. Seeing them unaware of our presence gave me a surge of confidence. I realized how vulnerable they were if we stayed sharp and patient. Dean whispered suggestions on how we could approach the situation. We didn't need to rush, we had the advantage of time and observation. Every gesture, every word they spoke, became a clue for how we could reclaim control. I felt my anger transform into focus. The basement had been their trap, but now the game had shifted. We were no longer cornered, we were observers, strategists, and soon, we would be the ones making the moves. Hidden in the shadows, I silently vowed that Jason and Meryl would not succeed. Their arrogance had blinded them, and we were ready to turn it to our advantage. Hidden in the shadows, Dean and I began taking stock of everything we knew about Jason and Meryl's schemes. Their deception had layers, but we were determined to uncover them all. We started gathering documents they had left carelessly around the house, bills, letters, and contracts that hinted at their manipulation of our finances. Using my phone, I discreetly photographed papers that proved their plans. Every signature, every notation became a piece of the puzzle. Dean moved quietly, securing folders and envelopes that could serve as undeniable proof of their intent. It was meticulous work, requiring patience and caution, but each discovery fueled our resolve. As we worked, I noticed how our fear had shifted. Where panic once consumed me, determination now took its place. My hands no longer shook as I sorted papers, and my mind sharpened with each detail we uncovered. The betrayal that had once felt overwhelming now seemed like a challenge we could confront and overcome. We documented every irregularity, making mental notes of who had signed what and when. Each photo and hidden document became a tool, a way to protect ourselves and reclaim what was rightfully ours. I could feel Dean's confidence rubbing off on me. Together, we formed a silent strategy, preparing for the moment when we would confront Jason and Meryl. A fire grew inside me, a mix of anger, sorrow, and resolve. They had believed they could steal from us and escape unpunished. But as I looked at the evidence we had gathered, I knew they had underestimated us. I whispered to myself, promising that their greed would not succeed, that justice would come, and that we would reclaim our home, our assets, and our peace. The quiet determination in that moment was stronger than any fear. We stepped out from our hiding place, moving into the living room with purpose. Dean stayed close, his presence steady, while I held the folders and photos tightly in my hands. Jason and Meryl froze when they saw us. Their smiles vanished, replaced by confusion and unease. I took a deep breath and spoke clearly, keeping my voice even but firm. "We know everything," I said. "Every plan, every scheme, every attempt to take what belongs to us. You thought you could manipulate us, but we have proof." I laid the documents and photos on the table one by one. Contracts, letters, and financial statements were displayed for them to see. Jason's eyes widened, and Meryl's face turned pale. They exchanged glances, realizing that their careful plotting had been uncovered. Dean added, "We are not leaving anything to chance. This house, these assets, and the life we built will remain ours. You have no control here." I looked directly at Jason, my heart heavy with betrayal but my mind clear. "You were our son," I said. "We trusted you, we supported you, and this is how you repay us? It ends now." The shock in their expressions was palpable. Every attempt at defense or excuse faltered when confronted with the evidence. Their arrogance had blinded them, and now it was gone. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of relief mixed with triumph. I had reclaimed authority over my life and my home. The betrayal was laid bare, and the power they sought was denied. Dean squeezed my hand, silently acknowledging that we had taken back what was ours. The confrontation was final, a turning point that marked the end of their deceit and the beginning of our control over the life we had built together. After the confrontation, Dean and I knew we needed professional help. We contacted a trusted lawyer to make sure every document, every claim, and every asset was legally secured. Sitting in the office, I felt a mix of anxiety and resolve. This was more than protecting property, it was about justice and accountability. The lawyer reviewed the evidence we had gathered and explained the steps to formalize ownership and prevent any further attempts at manipulation. Each word reinforced that we were finally taking control, not just emotionally but legally. Dean held my hand across the desk, silently sharing my relief and determination. Meanwhile, Jason and Meryl began to realize the seriousness of their actions. Letters were sent, formal warnings issued, and notices prepared to ensure they could no longer interfere with our lives. Their faces, once confident, now carried the weight of consequences they had ignored for too long. The process was tense. I watched every signature, every form, and felt the gravity of what was happening. This was not a small victory, it was the culmination of weeks of fear, betrayal, and careful planning. Seeing them face the reality of their choices gave me a sense of closure I hadn't expected. Even though the legal proceedings were formal and quiet, the satisfaction was deep. Betrayal had a price, and now Jason and Meryl were paying it. Their attempts to claim what wasn't theirs were stopped, and the house, our finances, and our security were fully restored to Dean and me. I felt a mixture of relief and empowerment. For the first time in months, I could breathe, knowing that the wrongs done to us were addressed, that justice had been served, and that the life we built would no longer be threatened. After the legal matters were settled, I spent quiet moments reflecting on everything that had happened. The pain of being betrayed by Jason lingered, a deep ache that felt almost physical. It was hard to accept that someone I had raised and loved could plan against me so deliberately. Yet, alongside the hurt, I felt a growing sense of closure. I had faced the betrayal, confronted it, and protected the life Dean and I had built together. Dean noticed the change in me. He placed a hand over mine and said, "I'm proud of you. You stayed strong when it mattered most." His words, simple but heartfelt, reminded me that our bond was unshakable. All the fear, anger, and sadness had strengthened us rather than breaking us. We spent hours talking, not about what Jason and Meryl had done, but about us, our marriage, our trust, and the life we wanted moving forward. We laughed over old memories, shared quiet reassurances, and promised each other that loyalty and love between us mattered more than any family tie. I realized that blood alone doesn't define trust. It's the actions we take for each other that matter. A weight lifted as I recognized my own resilience. I had confronted manipulation and greed without losing my sense of self. Dean's pride and unwavering support made me feel safe, cherished, and understood. Together, we rebuilt not just our home, but the foundation of our relationship, stronger than ever before. In the end, the betrayal of a child could not diminish our bond. It taught me the value of standing firm, of speaking up, and of holding on to the people who truly honor and respect you. Dean and I emerged from the storm, closer, wiser, and more determined to cherish the trust and love that remained between us. After the ordeal with Jason and Meryl, Dean and I decided to reclaim our home in every way possible. We renovated the basement, turning it from a place of fear into a cozy space filled with light, warmth, and comfort. Each brushstroke, each new piece of furniture, felt like reclaiming a part of our lives that had been stolen from us. With the house secure, I turned my focus to myself. I picked up old hobbies I had neglected, experimented with new creative projects, and dedicated time to learning things I had always wanted to explore. The process was liberating. I discovered strengths and passions I hadn't realized I possessed, and each small achievement fueled my independence and confidence. Dean watched me with admiration, supporting my growth while nurturing our partnership. We celebrated milestones together, not out of extravagance, but from the simple joy of building a life that reflected our choices and values. The home we had rebuilt was now a sanctuary, a place where fear and betrayal no longer held sway. As I reflected on the past months, I understood the lessons betrayal had forced upon me. I learned the importance of self-respect and setting clear boundaries, recognizing who truly deserves a place in my life. I saw how facing challenges head-on, rather than avoiding them, allowed me to regain control and protect what mattered most. Sitting in our newly restored living room, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The shadows of past deceit had faded, replaced by clarity and purpose. Dean and I shared quiet smiles, knowing we had emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected. I was ready to embrace the future, confident in my ability to protect myself, nurture my passions, and live with intention. The house was more than walls and rooms, it was a symbol of resilience, empowerment, and the peaceful life we had reclaimed together.